How is everybody?
Great.
I love Baltimore. This is the best city. I have traversed back and forth from the University of Maryland to Baltimore. Where are we? The University of Baltimore, is that how we say it? All morning long, and I have to say, it is a great city. I was first here in 2007. Many of you may be familiar with Barbara Babb, who hosted a conference on unified family courts. I went to that conference, and to be honest with you, I was feeling a little beleaguered, a little frustrated with my career and my job, not really sure where I wanted to go in the field of judicial administration, which is very broad. And after that conference, it became clear to me that my passion and my commitment is in the area of family law and family law reform. And so I applaud all of you for being here, for all of the work that you do, and I'm delighted that I get to share a little bit of work, my work with you. I'm going to start with just an overview of how we implemented the Resource Center at the University of DU, kind of going over the key components. Then I'll get to the good stuff. What do we really do and how does it work? And then I will talk about the transition that we recently made at the University of Denver to a similar model, but it is out in the community. I'm going to hold my comments on the evaluation of our model in terms of student learning and research until I participate in the panel presentation after my presentation. How does that sound? Good. Okay, so how many of you are students? Raise your hands. Yay, students. How many of you are family law lawyers, practitioners? Do we have mediators? Mental health? Yay!
Mental health professionals or mental health problems?
There you go. It could be a combination. We're all. And then we have one judicial officer, two judicial officers. Okay. So I am neither an attorney nor a mental health professional, but I kind of think of myself as an advocate. I dealt for many, many years in policy and research in the area of family law. So in 2012, when I got a phone call from a woman by the name of Becky Corliss, she is the executive director of ILES. I use a lot of acronyms, and it is not my choice. It is simply that Colorado DU loves acronyms. That stands for the Institute of the Advancement of the American Legal System. Becky contacted me and said, Melinda, I want to do something really different and unique in the area of family law. I want to create a model for an out-of-court resolution, and I'd like you to come and help me put this together. And I said, sure. And 2 weeks later, I was there. I'm getting ahead of myself. ILES is a think tank at the University of Denver. Its executive director is Becky Corliss. She is a former Colorado Supreme Court justice who really advocated for 4 areas of reform, and she felt that she couldn't do that in her tenure as a justice. So she left the Colorado Supreme Court, went to the University of Denver, and created ILES. The 4 initiatives that she's very passionate about are the Quality Judges Initiative, and that looks at the way judges are selected across the country, the way that they're trained, and the way that they're prepared. The second initiative is the Rule 1 initiative, and that one focuses on civil justice reform. The third is Educating Tomorrow's Lawyers. Gil, are you familiar with ETL, the efforts of experiential learning? And we can talk a little bit about that when I have my panel presentation. It is looking at ways that we can collaborate with law schools to provide more experiential learning opportunities for students. And then the fourth is my favorite, the Honoring Families Initiative. So as I was saying earlier, when Becky called me and asked me if I'd like to come work with her, I packed up my belongings. I promptly put everything in my car and drove to the University of Denver and had the wonderful opportunity to work with her for a year. We convened a national committee. Barbara Babb was one of those members, Andy Shepard, Marsha Klein-Pruitt, Peter Salem from AFCC, a lot of just amazing thought leaders in this area. And we had 2 charges. One was to look at developing an out-of-court alternative, and the second one was to look at innovation and reform within the court process. We actually prioritized the out-of-court reform, and spent a year convening, talking, putting our agendas, our personal agendas to the side and saying, what could it look like for separating and divorcing families if they didn't even go into the courthouse? We spent a lot of time, I mentioned this because we looked a lot at Australia's family relationship centers. How many of you are familiar with Australia's FRCs? In Australia, I think it was 15 years ago, in a response to improve how they were handling separating and divorcing families, and knowing that alternative dispute resolution models were really key in helping families successfully transition, the government passed legislation that created the Australian Family Relationship Centre. There are 64 of them in the country of Australia. They are all federally run and legislated. We looked a lot at what they were doing because they, prior to even going to a courthouse in Australia, you are required to go through the Family Relationship Centre and go through mediation. And then if you can't be successful in that, that's when you actually get a ticket, and you have to go to the courthouse, and people they frown upon getting a ticket. Relationship centers in Australia were developed, as I said, as a means to provide alternative dispute resolution to families, to really help families by providing some therapeutic support during the time of transition, to help their children, and to connect them with community resources. So we looked at that model and we really, really liked it, but we also had to face the reality that in the United States, our government does not adequately fund family court and innovations in the family law area. So we were thinking, what is a way that we can try to do this in a manner that doesn't rely on state funding? So we bantered about, we came up with two ideas. One would be a community model that relied on a lot of community partners. The other would be an academic model that would look at getting resources from schools and communities. And so we developed the Resource Center for Separating and Divorcing Families. We wanted to, first of all, provide quality services, dispute resolution services for separating and divorcing families. And we also decided at that time we wanted to do something else. We wanted to provide some real intense therapeutic support for those families, so we created a therapeutic component. But then the second goal, and parallel, was to provide an experiential learning opportunity to our students. As many of our students, you guys probably have experienced it, you get a lot of opportunity to research and go to conferences and maybe work in centers or clinics, but the actual hands-on working with a client from beginning until end does not happen a lot for law students, nor for PsyD students or social work students. So we wanted to provide our students with an opportunity to really, really work with clients on an ongoing, consistent beginning to end model. We developed some key components. I'm going to go back to this. We developed some key components, as I have been mentioning on the model. The first is it's housed in a university or a community. I will talk about the community at the very end of this presentation. As I said, at the University of Denver, we chose to focus on the academic model. So I reported to the deans of the Graduate School of Psychology, the Graduate School of Social Work, and the Law School at DU, and I tell people that I often found reporting to judges was a bit of a challenge. That was nothing. Higher ed is a whole different experiential learning opportunity for people like me. Also, what is unique about our model is that we maintain a very collaborative relationship with our courts. We work with the courts. We do not work separately from the courts. Many of our families coming to us are about to file or they have filed. If they have, I contact the court and I work with the court. The court is aware of our work with the family. And then what's really cool about our project is in Colorado, if you're getting divorced and you have children, you're required to have a court hearing. Is that the way it is in Maryland? So once families are done with us, we have a retired judge who actually comes to our center and does the court hearing. Part of our research, as I mentioned, is really looking at keeping them out of the court altogether and what outcomes that might promote. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we spent probably throughout the year, as the national group was convening and working on this model, we then created a local steering committee of local judges, family law practitioners, mental health professionals, families, and students to help with the actual how the model would be implemented at the University of Denver. Not once, I don't think we had one meeting, one event, one discussion go by without talking about children. At the center, we start every meeting with every parent and we ask, how are your children? We ask for pictures, we talk about kids. Kids really are the focus of our program, and they are a key component in this model. We want to be inclusive of children, and again, they don't drive the process, but they are the center of the work that we do. So we provide them we provide them with interviewing and assessment. We provide parents, with interviewing and assessment of their kids to let them know how we're doing. We provide support groups for kids. That's been really challenging, but really kind of interesting and fun. Kids are fascinating little creatures. And then we also do therapeutic services for children who we feel would benefit from some one-on-one counseling. We also provide, as it was clear, interdisciplinary services. So the law students and the mental health students, meaning the PsyD and the social work students, partner together in teams. From day one, they work as a team to work with families. I'll go through that process as soon as I'm done with the key components. But we knew that in the model, whether it is a community model or an academic model, the importance of really pairing the mental health professionals with the law professionals and mediator professionals from day one. It's been fascinating to watch as they have worked together. They develop what I think is a crucial respect and understanding for each other. And they also, I like to think, come up with a lot more creative solutions because they are working together. The other key component that we identified that was key in a model, whether it was academic or community, was this notion of financial education and planning. Many of you, all of you know, separating and divorcing families are oftentimes trying to figure out how they're going to go from a 2-income household to a 1-income household, how they're going to adjust their lifestyles to meet the needs of their children and the new reality that there are 2 households. So we have on board, it is not a student, but she is a financial planner who has done a lot of work in the family law community in Denver. And we also have another woman who has done a lot of financial education. So we provide seminars on financial education, setting up a budget, figuring out, do you sell your house, do you not sell your house? And then for those families who have a few more assets, we have the financial planner available to work with those families. And both of those financial planners attend our staffings and work with the mental health students and the law students. It's interesting, many people ask me, well, Melinda, how in the world did you pull all of these people together and actually do something? I think we talk, and we have talked for years and years and years about we need reform. There are pockets of reform all over the country, innovations all over the country, and what a wonderful world it would be if we could all share and work and collaborate and learn from each other. And in order to do that, we had to start at the local level. And as Ernest Hemingway says, the best way to trust someone is to trust them. And that is exactly what we did. It was painful at times. There were strong feelings, particularly in the area of including children in the interview process, and would that drive or not drive the mediation and the outcomes of the mediation. There were others who felt the children are the key of the key, and that we're really looking at ways that we can promote their well-being and welfare, and that it would be foolish, quite frankly, not to include children in the process. There were also lots of lively discussions about domestic violence and how that would fit and how we would triage cases in our model. We did include domestic violence advocates at the table from day one. They were very helpful and very supportive. I'll talk a little bit later when I talk about what we actually do in helping us develop a screening process. But the important thing was that everyone we could think of, we had a police officer, We had a judge, we had a teacher, we had a pediatrician. Everyone that we could think of who was involved in the lives of separating and divorcing families was at the table, and I think that really did make a difference. We are structured as a nonprofit. At the University of Denver, our fees are based on a sliding scale fee structure. I'll talk a little bit later in the community setting. We determined that by creating a nonprofit and promoting the concept of a nonprofit, that we could keep costs reasonable for families, and that has proven to be true. We now that we are in a community setting have a little bit of a different pricing structure, but that is in order to allow us to sustain our model and for it to become self-sustaining in 3 years, and I can be more specific about that a little later. And then, of course, the most important thing of any new project is evaluation. Thank you. So we have a rigorous evaluation that is being conducted by IELTS. It is both a process evaluation and an outcome evaluation. Do you guys know what I mean when I talk about process evaluation? So by process evaluation, I mean, are we working with the community? Does the community know and understand what we're doing? Do they make referrals? Are they working with families and with us? And then parents. Are parents finding the system? Are they satisfied with our brochures, our forms, understanding? Do they feel that it's accessible? So those are more process-oriented factors. The outcome factors are related to both parent and children well-being, and we do rigorous pre, interim, and post assessments of parents and their kids. It's pretty detailed, and I won't bore everyone. The more exciting news about it is after 2 years, we are finding statistically valid outcomes in the area of parent well-being and children well-being, levels of improved communication between parents and improved communication and co-parenting with their children, and parents are reporting lower levels of children's distress and higher levels of positive work with their children. And again, as I go back to over and over again, what an amazing finding that is after 2 years. And it's been a relatively small program, but it gives us a lot of hope for what we're going to see in the future. So this is just a visual that helps people understand kind of our process. At the center is the screening and the case management and the referral component. And then we really are fluid from providing educational services, educational referrals, by providing independent and group therapeutic support and counseling, the financial planning piece, and then it culminates in the legal drafting and dispute resolution services. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how it really works. Do you guys have any questions before about the implementation of the model? Good, we're on target. So when people come in, they usually find out about us through what we have in Colorado are self-help centers or the courthouse. And then we're also getting a lot of our referrals from the mental health professionals, therapists in the community. Families come to us, they go online to complete an intake questionnaire. Our only criteria is that you have to have children and you have to be willing to work together on some level. Once parents come to us and we get those intakes, we do a thorough screening to make sure that there are no protection orders, no other court orders that may be in place that may affect our ability to work with them. We then schedule each parent for a 1-hour interview. A mental health student and a law student work together to conduct that interview. I am telling you, when we were first planning this and we had our first year of students, they were adamant that this was not going to work. The mental health students said that the law students were too brusque and they wanted to rush the interview. The law students said the mental health students were taking too long and they were getting into therapy and it just wasn't appropriate in an interview process. We worked and worked and worked and gradually we got it down. That seems to happen every year with our students. But we feel it's important right from the beginning that parents see both a law student and a mental health student together. Again, as I said, the interview is very extensive. It goes into what the stressors are. It helps identify issues for the mediation. It talks about parents' perception of their children's well-being and what their issues are, their perceptions of each other, their willingness to communicate to one another. Gets down to the nitty-gritty. After that, the mental health student and the law student work together with one of our supervisors on staff to make an assessment. Are they right for services at our center? And then if so, what those services would be. And as I've alluded to, we offer anything from financial education and budget planning to individual counseling, to support groups, to children's interviews and counseling and assessments. If it is clear that there are significant mental health issues or addiction issues, we have decided to work. It depends on the client and on the family. We have worked with them on a limited basis. We've had a few cases where there have been some pretty significant depression issues, and we have asked permission from the client or from that parent to make contact with his or her therapist, and we have brought them into the fold. That has been a real interesting learning experience for the law students in particular on how you really truly do work in that interdisciplinary fashion. So we then call the parents back, both together. The students present their service plan recommendations. They talk about our pricing structure. They talk about our vision. They talk about our research. And parents can elect to sign up or not. I think to date we've had 200 families sign up for services. We screened a lot more than that. Some we were not able to take for domestic violence reasons and other reasons. And of those 200 families, 165, I believe, have engaged in service delivery. As I said, we offer therapeutic services, the individual children's services, financial education, dispute resolution. What's also really interesting about our model and something we learned along the way, two things actually, is that more often than not, parents come in and they think that this is a race and it's a sprint and they want to get it over with and they want to deal with the pain and move on. And they want their mediation yesterday. And slowing them down and helping them understand that the divorce process is really more of a marathon than a sprint, and helping them understand that by participating in what we call co-parent coaching prior to the mediation will help them actually have a more successful mediation. Those co-parent coaching sessions last 3 to 5 sessions for an hour apiece, and parents really work on how they're going to have a business-like relationship after the mediation. We talk about child development needs with them and how their needs of their children will evolve over time. We do a lot of role playing with them to help them learn how to communicate 5 years down the road when something changes, how they're going to manage that conflict and come together to make a decision on behalf of their children. Excuse me. We also have a set of families who we are calling discerning families. How many of you are familiar with discernment therapy? Yay. We realized early on, actually it was the students who realized early on, there was a lot of frustration by the students because they were working with clients where one client clearly had made the decision and was out the door, and the other client couldn't make a decision. We called them fondly our mixed agenda couples, and then found out about a wonderful therapy service that was created in Hennepin County, Minnesota called Discernment Therapy. It is a 3 to 4 session therapy session that really focuses on making a decision about what you're going to do about your marriage. It doesn't deal with the grieving. It's not traditional divorce therapy. It's really aimed at helping two parents decide, are you going to move forward or are you going to take a break? I mentioned this because it was very interesting. You know how the court, they want us to rush through cases and they got time frames, but you're dealing with a family who can't make a decision. It was very interesting with those families. Oftentimes they would decide to try to reunify or to reconcile. Thinking, I can't give numbers off the top of my head, but it was quite a few of those families who would go away for a while, and 6 months later they would come back. And so that too was kind of interesting. It is kind of contrary to our case management in the court system. obviously. And then we would also conduct the dispute resolution. We did 2 mediation sessions. We would do a parenting mediation session and then a financial mediation session. All of our mediation sessions were conducted by the mental health student and the law student together under the strict supervision of our attorney mediator, supervisor, teacher on staff. I forgot to mention, the students went through a comprehensive 80-hour training. They did 40 hours of mediation, and then the other 40 hours was a combination of interviewing, mental health, family dynamics 101 for the law students, and family law 101 for the mental health students, and a lot of team building. That was done prior to the start of their placement at the center. What was really interesting was that our philosophy at the beginning was, watch, listen, learn, and then give it a go. By the end of the year, almost all of our students were conducting the majority of the mediation sessions, and they were doing it successfully, they were doing it confidently, and the parents were confident in them, which I think says a lot about our training and about their ability. Sometimes I think we're critical of, because they are students, can they do this? Will they work? They don't have the life experiences. They've never been married. They haven't owned a house. And sometimes that was a factor, but more often than not, it was not a factor for parents. They really appreciated having that coaching and having a team help them through the process. And then, as I said earlier, the really cool thing about our model is we do final orders at the center. We have a retired judge who is wonderful. He used to be the chief judge of the Denver District Court, and he comes once a month and does the orders at the hearing. We do it very much similar to drug court. Families sit around the table. They have both the students that worked with them, the mental health student and the law student are there. Our attorney mediator is there. And then any therapist that worked with them is also there and present and participates in the hearing. It's pretty cool. So, do we have time? I'm going to show you a quick video that kind of, I think, is much better than me talking to you. That kind of illustrates a little bit more about what we do.
For many separating and divorcing families, the traditional legal process can aggravate existing conflict, leading to delay, cost, increased anxiety, and stress in what is already a challenging situation. The Resource Center for Separating and Divorcing Families at the University of Denver provides families with affordable and accessible legal education, dispute resolution, therapeutic services, and financial planning services.
I don't know how we would have been able to do it without the Resource Center. I'm incredibly happy with the results. What could have been very ugly, very damaging as an end result ended up being very positive for everybody involved.
They took care of us. They looked at us as a family instead of just individuals. So I think that really helped us get through the process a lot smoother.
We always work with families, and they seem to be kind of running all over the place, kind of looking around for services and having to go kind of everywhere just to find out, find their attorney, a therapist, a mediator, and it just seemed like that in and of itself was a big stress for families, and having all the different services in one place where they can go, and I think that takes a lot of stress out.
This isn't just about going in and getting that divorce. It's about the holistic picture and helping them through the grief and loss aspects that are definitely going to come up when there's any kind of divorce or separation.
I think working with the students and everybody's supervisors, I think they really took the time to help us and really look at us and really ask a lot of questions and make us think. Is this what you want? Are you sure? Once it's settled, this is what's going to happen. Gave us time to think about it. Gave us homework.
The students were very professional in their goings-on and making sure that we were informed through every step of the process. It was very relaxed. We didn't have to get into a hostile environment. Both the psychologist, student, and the law student provided a lot of insight and a lot of help going through the process.
It's just really opened my eyes to how an interdisciplinary approach can really not only help us know how to do our jobs better, but help the families get along and get the help they need.
We opted to have our final hearing here at the center. And when doing that, it was more like something really personal. And it was just more of us just having a conversation at a table instead of being in a courtroom, making our final decisions and everything being done.
It was pretty intimate with the judge. He was able to read through our agreement and comment on his own. And it was not only was it easy, but it was very relaxing, non-confrontational, and both of us understood, and he made sure we understood every part of the agreement.
And I know, based on 30 years' experience as a judge, how destructive and harmful it is, and how beneficial it is for the kids if parents can sit down, work together, and come up with a plan. Because as I've told people over the course of 3 decades, this is the easy part. I can move forward, enter a decree of dissolution or a decree of legal separation, and the two of you will go on and lead separate lives. But I cannot enter a decree that says you're no longer parents, and you are still parents. And you know how long you're still parents? Forever.
One of the most important things we do at the Resource Center is we provide a forum for children of divorce. We give them a voice, we prioritize them, and we help their parents understand what their real needs and anxieties are through the transition process.
The kids really enjoyed Thursday nights. I forgot one, and oh my gosh, it was the end of the world. They're like, oh my gosh, we don't get to see our friends. And that's really what it was. It was, an opportunity for them to have fun. The staff here, the interns that were working with the children, were so full of life and so vibrant and just fit perfectly with the children about, what they wanted to do. There's a lot of good feedback, a lot of creative input, and there was just a very open atmosphere for the children. We
were having struggles. Communicating was the biggest thing, and without that, our relationship would not be where it is now. I think the process, that option to work with a counselor to help us work through our problems, and that has been a lifesaver, I think, for our relationship, because my daughter loves me, I love her to death, and just to see our relationship just crumble to the side because of the divorce, it really would have hurt me probably for the rest of my life, and her.
The research has shown that the highest predictor of how a child will do is how much conflict there is around the separation and divorce and whatnot. So it seemed to make sense to, okay, how do we minimize the conflict? And then so much of the conflict that I saw was generated kind of early in the process, where something happens and then they just take off and they're off on this track. And once you've gone down that track, it's very hard to backtrack over that animosity and what's happened and start fresh. So it seemed to make sense that getting in early and getting them in, giving them the services and the support they need would make it less likely for it to go bad.
Without this, I think I would have probably come out and probably collapsed under the weight after, a divorce was done under the traditional method, because that would have been just way too much stress.
All things are integrated. The legal aspect, the mediation aspect, the child and counseling care and mental health aspects are all integrated. And I think that, like I said, is the genius of the program.
I think I didn't quite expect it, but so many families have expressed so much appreciation and gratitude for what we do here. And so that's also helped me realize how helpful this really is, and that it's a service that's really needed.
What's really interesting is I have been asked, why are there all men in that video? And it just so happened, I'm not a researcher, I do not know why, but it seems as though we have had more men who are willing to talk about the benefit of this, who want to share their story, than we have females. I don't know why. We now have some females, this was done a year and a half ago, we now have quite a few females who are willing to speak and to work with us. It's also interesting to note that when we did our first support group for adults, it was the men's support group that filled up first, which I thought was interesting and also very telling, because we know it tends to be that females, we talk to one another, we have a network of people that we talk to, and I think for men, that's just not quite as prevalent. And so for them to have a place to come and to work together, and actually when the 6-week session was done, they ended up continuing to meet for dinner. I'm not sure if they're still meeting or not, but it was kind of cool. I will mention briefly, and then I want to answer any questions and close to honor the time. We have moved from the University of Denver. We are now called the Center for Out-of-Court Divorce. We are a nonprofit in the Denver community. We have this really cool new building. We have lots of support. We continue to partner with DU, but the reality is what we did at DU was incredibly expensive. And because we were a sliding scale fee, we were not sustaining ourselves to the degree to which we needed. So we worked with some amazing people out of Boston called the Room 40 Group. They helped us create a 2-year business model, business plan, and we transitioned to the community. We opened last September. I have plenty of brochures in my bag if you guys would like some. It talks about, it's basically the same. We rely less on student help and more on professionals, but we do have a student component, and as I said, next year we'll bring back the full force DU intern component, but we really are trying to look at ways that we can sustain ourselves. I will also quickly mention what was interesting to me was that I anticipated when we opened that we would get primarily lower income families. That was not the case. Probably well over 2/3 of our families make a combined income of probably $150,000, $160,000 and then up. So we were looking in our business plan for the next couple of years of ways that we can still charge reasonable prices for quality services, but also sustain ourselves. And then I finally will, I am not the executive director of the Center for Out-of-Court Divorce. I am working with Becky Corliss at IOS to create the National Center for Out-of-Court Divorce, and we will be a national nonprofit that will be able to provide technical assistance and services to jurisdictions like yours who may want to start a center. We really feel strongly that we would like to see this take off across the nation, but we would also like to make sure that people learn from our models. They will create their own. It will reflect your own unique needs of your community, but that it will have the components of what we know and we've researched and demonstrated that works. So please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. It was a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to staying with you guys throughout the day and learning more. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have time for questions.
Yes.
So I've got a couple questions, the first of which is when you were using the interns. Oh yeah, nobody can hear me without this. When you were using the interns, did you notice a difference between the beginning of the year and the end of the year?
Yeah.
And so how do you deal with new students at the beginning of each year having to learn these new skills and still keep the level of quality assurance for your clients at a level where you want it to be?
That is a very good question. And yes, there is a distinct difference between the beginning of the year and the end of the year. That's why I did emphasize that 80 years of, 80 hours of training really is very hands-on training. We have actors come in who pretend that they're parents and children from a particular case, and the children and the students work with them. But that's why we did decide to hire initially 3 practitioners, the psychologist who you saw, the social worker who you saw, and the attorney mediator, who are very, very active and have private practices in the Denver community. We opted to go that direction rather than we did not have any tenured professors in any of the schools that really had maintained their private practice, and we felt it was important to assure quality to have them. So they really initially did a lot of the role modeling, and then the students gradually, as they became more comfortable, took over.
All right, so that takes me to the second question. Thank
Sure.
you for that. And that is with regard to the professionals you're hiring, is that full-time employment or part-time employment for those that come in to oversee and or to provide the services in lieu of?
We had some of them work part-time, some of them worked full-time. In our current model, we have we have 3 full-time therapists and 2 attorney mediators. We're starting small again, and then we will gradually increase our staffing as our volume grows.
So you're making the distinction between 3 full-time therapists and 2 full-time attorney mediators as opposed to mediators or mental health mediators.
Yes.
What is the deal with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. In Colorado, we don't have a distinction. You can be a mental health mediator or an attorney mediator. We simply did that in our program as a means to kind of keep track of who was doing what, and so I still use that language. There really is the mental health professionals are also mediators. They tend to, their responsibilities are more therapeutic, but they do co-mediate with the attorney mediator. Does that help?
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
As you probably know, there are more and more non-marital families appearing in our courts.
Yes.
And, you know, when I saw the Center for Out-of-Court Divorce, I was a little disappointed that this is not focused on the family disputes happening in non-marital families.
Yes, if you only knew the hours of discussion. We will take never married families, and we have actually had quite a few. Denver Juvenile Court got a hold of us and became quite fond of us and now sends a lot of their never married couples to us. That's an interesting challenge. The Center for Out-of-Court Divorce, we're working in our marketing to make sure that people know that you do not have to be getting a divorce, you do not have to be married, but I agree with you. I'd love to change it, but.
Do the parties have an opportunity to get legal advice, separate legal advice?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things we learned quickly in year 1 at the Resource Center was that there were families that needed legal advice that we could not provide because we were a dispute resolution model. In Colorado, we are starting to use a lot of unbundled services. I don't know if that's allowed here. So we have yay! Oh, that's right, yay. So we have an unbundled list and work with attorneys who support our philosophy and are willing to do unbundled, and we make recommendations. We do not try to handle cases that clearly need legal advice. And we've also had some parents who are represented. We've had a couple of cases where mom was represented, dad was not. And the attorney knew about us and actually thought that we could be of assistance in navigating that process, and that was quite successful.
Hi. You alluded in your talk to children being included and benefiting both the child and the process. In these steps that you talked about, which ones were the children included in, and were they actually in mediations with the parents?
Thank you. That was a lively discussion in our planning whether or not to include children if they were age appropriate, and the decision was made we're actually focusing on 3 years of intense research right now, so we decided in the research period that we would not actually include children in the mediation, but they are interviewed prior to age appropriate, prior to the mediation, and then we schedule the parents for a feedback session with the therapist who interviewed the kids to talk with them about where the kids are at, what their desires and wants are, and so that the parents have that prior to mediating.
Our last question.
What's similar and what's different between your model and the Australian model that you referenced at the beginning of your talk?
Thank you. Our model is a little more comprehensive. The Australian model, at their locations, mediation occurs, but if there's a need for therapy or some financial assistance or planning, they are referred off-center to outside individuals. So at the University of Denver model, at the Denver model, we do everything at the same location. Is that?
If you had that kind of government funding that is provided in Australia, what would you do?
I would do lots of things. I cannot tell you. I came into this actually being a little bit cynical, not, saying this is all beautiful and lovely, but is it really going to work? And we had Gail Prudenti, who is a judge out of New York. She came a few weeks ago and spent time with us, and she walked away and she said, I had to see it to believe it, and I believe. It works, and unfortunately that funding is an issue. What I would like to see, and my hope is that the community model in Denver will become sustainable after 2 years. That is our goal. That is what we anticipate to happen. And then we can help jurisdictions across the country develop their own model that will be sustainable and not so reliant on government funding, because in Australia, I forgot to mention, they are losing funding for their family relationship centers. I know you guys talk about it in your book, that there are all of these resources and all of these innovations in the system, and then budgets become an issue. Those resources dwindle, and you're kind of starting back at square one. So I view this to be a cool partnership between private and public sector funding. And I would also say this model is not for everyone. I apologize, I meant to say that at the beginning. We have had families that we have referred back to the court process who belong in the court. They need to be there. We are not for every family. Okay, thank you very much.